Mandragora. Whispers of the Witch Tree is a soulsvania, a marriage of Dark Souls-inspired mechanics and combat with the trademark ability-gated exploration and platforming of metroidvania games. To top it off, the game also features a far more robust talent tree and class system than typically found in similar games, and Mandragora's additional RPG characteristics bring some welcome depth to a genre that is often systemically minimalistic. I played through Mandragora at a relatively brisk pace. It took just over 18 hours to reach the final boss, though plenty of side quests, optional bosses, and secrets remain. There are about 30 hours of content for a relaxed playthrough, while completionists can expect to spend at least twice that long earning every achievement. Overall, it's a game that feels geared toward genre veterans, with a deceptively welcoming start that's interrupted by a substantial difficulty spike leading into its second act, along with a brutal final boss that will undoubtedly be a hard wall even for skilled players. Those who are put off by metroidvania platforming can be at ease, as Mandragora's infrequent platforming challenges are on the lower end of difficulty. Branching out in Mandragora's talent trees, players begin by selecting a class playstyle. This choice merely determines which branching skill tree is unlocked from the start, while the others will open up at level 25. I tried several of them through the first act to decide which to stick with, and found each choice remarkably distinct. The Nightshade is Mandragora's rogue, complete with a combo point system akin to World of Warcraft's rogue. Meanwhile, the Sword and Board Vanguard is the archetypal warrior who can parry with a shield and unleash heavy melee attacks. There are also various magic users specializing in different flavors of brightly colored destruction. The build variety in Mandragora is on par with isometric action RPGs. I found that even within a single class choice, vastly different playstyles can emerge depending on which talents are chosen. I went with the nature magic wielding Wild Warden and built around its lightning and nature spells. While I could just as easily have geared it toward magic-infused melee combat, instead, the talent tree is node-based, with smaller nodes offering stat boosts and the larger ones yielding playstyle-defining bonuses. Investing in these smaller nodes is clearly intended to be a late-game venture. Only once my class was fleshed out with the major nodes to bring my build online did I concern myself with things like +1 spirit. Multiclassing is also a possibility, but is similarly reserved for late game, where I could relatively cheaply respec into additional trees. It's theory crafting galore, and although the skill tree may be a lot to digest for newcomers, the build variety in Mandragora is on par with isometric action RPGs. Mandragora's Souls-like combat, moment-to-moment combat and movement is where much of its Souls-like DNA is expressed. There's a rapidly replenishing stamina bar tied to sprinting, dodging, and attacking, and the pace of combat is a methodical game of pattern recognition, rhythmic timing, and attacking or dodging economically. Movement carries a weight and momentum that some might describe as floaty, and this may be off-putting to gamers used to extremely tight 2D platformers. However, that approach suits its Souls-like combat pacing, and the game's platforming challenges are seldom complex enough to miss the pixel-perfect precision of its 2D cousins. Also on the Souls-like front, the game features genre staples, an upgradable, rechargeable healing flask, witch stones that act as bonfires, and fast travel locations, and corpse runs to retrieve lost essence upon death. Of course, difficult bosses are a highlight in Mandragora and among Souls-likes, and the game's mostly memorable cast ranges from laughably easy to some of the hardest mandatory bosses in the genre, particularly its downright sadistic final boss whose difficulty is compounded by a stressful timed mechanic. Unfortunately, the game does have a habit of reusing mini-bosses, but there were at least slight mechanical twists to soften the repetition. Outside of bosses, Mandragora's enemy variety isn't stellar, but each biome is populated with a distinct crew of enemies that pose unique challenges. As such, different builds may have vastly different experiences fighting through a given biome. Mandragora's Metroidvania exploration. Although Mandragora certainly bears Metroidvania influences, it most often feels more like a side-scrolling Souls-like, coming full circle to Dark Souls' Metroidvania level design. There are frequent, kicking down the ladder, moments that open shortcuts back to the Witch Stone or to shorten a runback to a boss, and although there is some interconnectivity between biomes, the game doesn't often deliver mind-blowing hidden paths from one biome to another. Its Metroidvania influences are most apparent in Mandragora's traversal abilities, though these fell short of their potential to shake up gameplay and were spaced just far enough apart that progression felt a bit stingy on this front. Some traversal abilities include a grappling hook, a double jump, and a ground slam that reveals underground paths, but aside from two specific abilities, they had no impact on combat. More interactivity between the traversal upgrades and the game's combat would have helped tie together its Souls-like and Metroidvania aspects and make each acquisition feel more impactful. Each ability opened paths both in backtracking and for the critical path in equal measure, and I was often generously rewarded for revisiting my manually placed map markers to overcome earlier obstacles. Speaking of being generously rewarded, Mandragora is rife with secret rooms hidden just out of sight in classic metroidvania fashion. Some of these were quite cleverly hidden, while others are tucked behind breakable walls just begging to be swung at. Crafting and cooking in Mandragora. Setting itself apart in the genre, Mandragora boasts numerous features one would typically find in an RPG. There's a crafting system tied to various NPCs found throughout the journey, and each vendor can level up by crafting items or offering them new blueprints. The crafting system serves as a more deterministic way to acquire helpful loot instead of hoping for a lucky drop, though drops are often still some of the game's best gear. Curiously, one NPC even comes with a gardening system where players can plant seeds, wait 15 minutes, and retrieve the herb. Players may not need to make much use of this, but it was nice to know you could produce more potions whenever you wanted. Similarly, some might not bother with cooking, but it can yield plenty of helpful consumables. Despite all the crafting and materials gathering, there's a noticeable lack of a gear upgrade system to make equipment more powerful. Some equipment can be slotted with gems that enhance a few stats, but there's no such thing as a +5 greatsword in Mandragora. A means to improve gear could have helped with upgrade dry spells, because depending on one's build, it could be a while before appropriate upgrades can be found or crafted. Along with dozens of side quests spanning from highly rewarding to eminently skippable, Mandragora also features a simple bounty system. One might ask you to take out 20 wolves and be rewarded with a few thousand gold. However, because bounties are plentiful, you may find yourself swimming in gold. Mandragora's story isn't a vague Souls-like mystery. Mandragora's story is persistently engaging and avoids the Souls-like route of being vague and ominous. Without spoiling the particulars, there's a clear, easy-to-follow plot with enough twists and turns to keep players invested until the end and interested in the bosses they face. While there are some dialogue choices, they have no tangible impact on the story's direction and were just a role-playing device. In Mandragora, the world is threatened by an alternate dimension of sorts called entropy, and it's in the player's best interest to prevent entropy from consuming the world. Entropy is also the source of a unique mechanic in Mandragora. Occasionally, I had to enter entropy through various portals, but mortals can only survive in entropy for a limited time. There's an entirely separate talent tree reserved for survival in entropy, which can increase the duration of that timer, damage dealt when the timer is low, or other helpful effects. Entropy is also where some of the game's more serious platforming takes place, including one memorable sequence that turned the entire game upside down. While not as involved as Lords of the Fallen's umbral mechanic, it did well to break up the pace and presented gameplay challenges that are only possible in a dreamlike hellscape. Sights and sounds of Mandragora. Mandragora is a gorgeous game, occasionally offering stunning vistas that make its 2.5D world feel far larger than it is. It has a vibrant, painterly art style that's complemented nicely by its hand-illustrated cutscenes and dialogue portraits, and its diverse biomes contrast well enough to keep the game routinely feeling fresh. From the stained glass of its Castlevania-style vampire castle to the lush and hazy forest home of the witches, Mandragora seemed to one-up itself visually with each new location. These visuals didn't come at much of a performance cost, as Mandragora runs butter smooth on a mid-range PC. While Mandragora's score is routinely excellent and its sound design in combat is believable and punchy, its voice performances are rarely memorable. Being a dialogue and story-driven game, it can be a letdown when a major narrative moment falls flat because of line delivery. Despite this, some characters do manage to shine on sheer personality and writing. One particular vampire comes to mind, and I looked forward to each interaction with them. For fans of soulsvania combat, Mandragora is a must-play for its astounding build variety alone, but that's thankfully not its only good quality. Addicting combat, a thoughtful narrative, and premium visuals make for a memorable game that uplifts the genre and sets an example to follow. Mandragora achieved what it set out to do, deliver a fun and engaging metroidvania, while landing just shy of its full potential in a few areas. My rating for Mandragora, Whispers of the Witch Tree is 9 out of 10.